Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. My name is Max Hollein. I'm the Marine Academy French Director of the Met, and I want to welcome you also on behalf of our President, Dan Weiss, to this very special evening, to the inauguration of our third Facade Commission at the Met, to something that we feel so passionate about. It's an installation that transforms the Met, that changes the facade, that basically also is a new way for a couple of months about sometimes how we look at the institution, not only visually, but kind of reconceptualizing it. So commissioning an artist to do the facade of the Met is, on the one hand, probably a very prominent commission. It couldn't be more front and center. It's, on the other hand, also very challenging. It's an environment where you have this Beaux-Arts facade, you have these niches, you have a lot of traffic, a lot of noise around it, you have banners. So it is an opportunity and a challenge together. And I'm very grateful to Hew Locke that he took our invitation and created something really extraordinary. And I hope many of you, when you came into the front entrance, saw already his sculptures, his trophies. And for those of you who have not seen it yet, you will see them when getting out of the door after our party. But we want to make sure that we celebrate this very special moment appropriately. So I want to extend my thanks, of course, to Hew for his incredible work. I also want to thank his two basically partners, the two people who are going to interview or talk to him tonight, and that's Tumelo Mosaka, who is the Mellon project director for African American and African Diaspora Studies, and also for African American and African Diaspora Studies at Columbia University. And Tumelo actually has written and exhibited also Hew's work, has written about it for many years. So we're very glad that he's able to join us. And also, of course, there's Kelly Baum, the Cynthia, Hazen, Polsky, and Leon Polsky Curator of Contemporary Art here at the Met, and the acting curator in charge. And she has been the curator of this installation. She worked together with Hew over the last year and a half on this major installation. The Met has followed, of course, Hew's work, and that was also due to Sheena Wagstaff, who has been a strong proponent of his work and also of this installation. We have an important work of Hew's in our collection, and we are glad to have him be thinking about the facade of the Met, thinking about the institution, thinking about the collection, and create a work specifically for the Met for it. So before I turn over to our three basically panelists, I want to say a few words just to introduce the artist in a certain way. Hew was born in Scotland to two artist parents. But the family moved early then to Guyana in 1966, and that was on the eve of the country's independence from British rule. So on the one hand, this is just a childhood, and it's on the other hand, it is a formative experience, probably also for his work. It's not the only kind of influence, but clearly having grown up in this environment of post-colonial development has formed Hew before, and also then when he returned to the United Kingdom in 1980 to study art, he was always connected to that. Guyana's influences continue to play a role for Hew, and he said about that himself, about his childhood home: if I don't go there every few years, I go quite strange in the head. I need it. So there's a strong connection there that we feel is resonant, of course, in his work. His installations, his work is outstanding here at the Met. There are 4 trophies in gold, and they are done in this characteristic style of Baroque extravagance and flamboyance and theatricality that he has. the work is composed, it's basically a pastiche, it's an assemblage of different objects, works of art that are being cited in these works that he kind of found in the Met's collection, and basically so that expanding and challenging narratives and untold stories across histories, geographies, and also artistic styles. And most importantly, it really addresses also the questions of how objects move from one place to the other, how they are being collected, what collections mean, how they became part of that collection, what they represent, what they should represent, and where they should represent it. I think this is going to be an installation that will be reflected by many, and it's an installation that really goes at the core of some of our current discussions about the museum, its identity, and its collection. So we will hear more about this right now, and I want to thank again Kelly Baum for her work on this. I want to thank the entire Met staff who worked on this installation, all the other colleagues in the other departments who worked with Hew also in regard to the curatorial areas, and especially also, of course, our whole exhibition and installation crew who've made this possible. I also want to thank the collaborators in Hew's studio, especially Indra Kanu and his fabricator Steve Haynes, who have done an enormous work in making that possible. And we are also deeply grateful for our sponsors and donors to make this installation possible, and that's the Jane and Robert Carroll Fund, and also the Art Mentor Foundation Lucerne, Cynthia, Hazen, Polsky, and Leon Polsky, and Jerry Spire and Catherine Farley. So thank you so much, and I'll now turn it over to Hew, Kelly, and Tumelo. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to see such a full auditorium here to celebrate the opening of Hew Locke's commission, Gilt. Thank you for joining us. We're very excited to have you, and we're very excited to debut Hew's commission today. So we're going to launch right into our conversation, and our guest, Tumelo Mosaka, will start us off.
Yes, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I want to take this opportunity to thank Kelly for the invitation and for sharing the stage with Hew. My relationship with Hew goes back a while ago when I first curated the first Caribbean exhibition at the Brooklyn Museum. And I think I was struck by the fact that, you know, when we commissioned Hew to do a wall piece there was a lot of intensity in thinking about objects that had historical value. And I think what was also interesting is how Hew was working, you know, there's a sense of chaos in the work, but controlled chaos. And at the same time, he has this ability to camouflage the objects to create this fantastical drama. So I would like maybe Hew to start us off by giving us a sense of, you know, what kind of liberties does this process of working offer him?
How to start talking about that? I'm just trying to make something good, you know? Trying to make something work. Terrified of failure, quite frankly. Let's be blunt. You know? But I get obsessed, you know what I mean? Obsessed with little bits and pieces of fragments of cut up, of perforated brass, little bits of this, little bits of that. And the objects that go into these sculptures are picked like pieces of, like bits of paint. I'm a sort of three-dimensional painter, essentially, I suppose, if I think about it. It'll take me a while to get going, so don't worry.
So you mentioned three-dimensional painter, but at the same time, I think, you know, you work with so many different variety of materials. And also...
Okay, here's the thing. I get bored, you know. So I got to keep things lively, you know. So if somebody is going to contact me from a Murano glass factory and say, come and do something, I'm like, it's in Venice, it's in Murano, nice one, I'm there, you know. So, and that's how it works. And then 6 months later, you're showing a glass piece, the first one you've ever done, and then you think, well, that went well. Maybe the next thing should be bronze, or the next thing should be like a walking past shops and looking at an antique bust and thinking, well, I can do something with that, but I'm not sure what. And you buy it, it hangs around in the studio for ages, and then it gets covered with layers of material. But they're not just layers of material, but layers of meaning, because each thing means something, and then it all collages together to create a whole, if you see what I mean. I mean, like, it is all about collage, basically.
So, I mean, in one sense, it seems like you're a scholar of history. You know, you seem to have a very heavy investment in thinking about what objects.
A scholar is a bit flattering. You know, I wouldn't go that dramatic. But yeah, history is a thing for me. You know, I've always said that if I wasn't an artist, I would have been a historian. And now I'm an artist with an interest in history. And I think it's to do with growing up in Guyana. It's to do with the people surrounding me. Yeah, it's been in me for that whole thing of history for a long time, very long time.
And so here we are at the Met.
I know, it's scary, huh?
So maybe you can, can you start to tell us a little bit about your thinking process for this commission?
Okay. This is very frustrating because the idea is to create trophies. So where did this idea come from? And usually these things drop in as out of thin air, out of an air of panic. Oh my God, I gotta do something. In other words, you're offered an opportunity. That's the start. You've got to sell that thing to people. You know, you can't just turn up and say, right, well, let me do what I want to do. You know, and so I was thinking, how can this thing work? And somehow this idea of a trophy slipped into my brain and wouldn't let go. Because what I realized, the problem here is the facade. And the problem are the banners outside the Met advertising different shows. And those banners can kill you, you know? And so I thought, I've got to do something there which holds up against this. And I started with the idea, and here's where I'm pausing because I'm wondering how honest to be, huh? You know, I started with the idea of like, I'm going to make this thing big, and it's going to be this and be that, and it's like, no, that's bombastic, overbearing, unnecessary. And then slowly but surely, it was refined down to a single face trophy, which looks good on one side, but it's completely functional and rubbish or ordinary on the other side. It's just a facade. And that seemed, and all of a sudden, once that was in my head, it's like a facade for the Facade Commission. This makes sense, you know? Not just that. When I got the idea in my head, and then somebody points out that the building directly opposite, where I would love to live but can't afford it, the building that has a facade right at the top. There's an extra story which is not real. I was like, oh, this is perfect, you know? So the facade for the facade, you know? And yeah, and 1.5, 1 3/4 years later, I'm sitting on a thing, in a chair thinking, right, it happened, you know, because in art, there are no guarantees, you know, but yeah. So here we are.
I've been thinking about the facade a lot, and my comments this morning at the press preview revolved around facades. I was struck by the fact that when we presented the commission to the press this morning, I was standing at the top of stairs in front of a facade featuring sculptures that were facades looking out onto an avenue that was full of facades, not just architectural facades, human facades as well. And facades are masks. They're faces. They're faces that cover other faces.
Exactly.
They conceal and disguise, but they also project.
Exactly, exactly.
Yes, and the facade as an idea and a thing provided you with so much conceptual leverage.
Yeah.
And you're really the first artist. You're the first of the 3 artists we've commissioned so far that has engaged with the facade that directly. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, I realize everything's, if you're lucky, right, and I got lucky, things can fall into place, and you suddenly realize, oh, hang on, it's a facade on a facade, that's good, but then there are trophies, and the whole building is, I'm working with the whole building, not just the niches, it's the whole thing, because the Met is a trophy, but then that's just a conceptual idea that I've sort of started to come up with. But the facade thing, it's a very theatrical thing, because it's like theatrical flats. Very performative. And the idea that, I love the idea that from the front, it looks nice and shiny, and you get around the side, and it's like, oh, hang on, it ain't shiny at all, you know? And it's like a conjuring trick, it's a magician's trick. It's like telling you that something is more grand than it really is. Hence the title Gilt, because gilt is just one wafer-thin bit of gold leaf, and what's underneath is not that pretty. But I like the idea that it's just a thing. And gilt is a phrase used in literature and stuff to describe somebody as superficial. They're all about guilt, And then, of course, I started to think of, well, this is a Beaux-Arts building, part of the Gilded Age, with a facade on top of it, and the facade is things. So all of a sudden, you start to see all these little things dovetailing into one another, and you think, oh, hang on, this is really working. And that's how I build up excitement about the project. And then there's a panic about how the hell you're going to do it. But
So that's very interesting, because I think at the same time, this idea of trophy being about, about conquering,
yes,
about ownership.
Yes.
But at the same time, I think when you look at the facade, these trophies on the building facade, you also have these fragments. So there is a sense that, in the one sense, the trophy, symbolizes this sort of accumulated wealth or knowledge, but then at the same time, so there's some contradiction that you're pointing to with these fragments. I think if we didn't have the fragments, we would feel as if you were trying to contain and celebrate. But there's a sense that, yes, in one sense, they seem to want to celebrate, but at the same time, there's this other contradiction of because something else happening with the fragments.
They're broken off from different times in history to come together to make something about now. And that's, for me, interesting. And also, even just off the top of my head, when you come to a museum, you go away and your memories are fragments of the objects that you've seen. You say, oh, I remember that. But you may not even remember the whole thing. You may remember a bit of the object, or not even see the details. And that's what I got really quite interested in. The fragments, and where do these things come from, and what's their story? Because the objects in this museum, you can make a film out of each object, each painting, each sculpture, each artifact, because their stories are long, complicated, and sometimes quite messy, and sometimes not messy,
So can you let's get deeper into the weeds here, and maybe let's talk about a few objects that you were drawn to.
So there's one object which Flicking. No, sorry, we got, there we go. So on the bottom, that thing, bottom left-hand side, yeah. That's, I've used the head of this little boy, who is supposed to be the son of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. And I quite like that he's sort of from two different cultures joined together, you know. But I thought it was interesting, the history of this particular statue, because it was found in Suez, and I love that phrase, found, you know. It was somebody's walking on the road, it kicked some sand. Oh, what's underneath there? I love that, you know. You know, and it's where things come from. It's fascinating to me, and it's not simple. The stories aren't simple. The stories are complex, and I keep going on. I become a complexity bore. I keep going. I'm a fan of complexity. You know, I'm a fan of the fact that things aren't simple. On the top, above there, that goblet, that's Avar, or early Byzantine. And what I like about that is that's made from looted gold. So gold looted by one empire, made into something, looted from one empire by another empire, made into something completely new, completely different. And so there's an aspect of rise and fall of empires in this particular piece. But also it's about the Met as a powerhouse. I mean, this place is a powerhouse. I mean, I was joking backstage about saying, Met's a tough place, man. I could crush you like a bug, you know. but it's the Met. I keep going back to the trophy. I mean, these objects are trophies of the Met. So making a trophy to depict them makes a lot of sense. It's sort of these talks have their certain limitations, and the limitation is like, you know, because I will walk out of this and think, you know what, man, I didn't get the point across quite right, and I'm constantly trying to be not misunderstood, if you see what I mean, because as I said before, things are complex and not simple. He pauses.
Hew.
Yeah.
So another object, well, so many of these objects that you've chosen, all of them are fascinating. All of them have very complex histories, as you say, and they're all implicated in relations of power, conquest,
absolutely,
migration, exchange. This is true of the flintlock, which appears top center.
Yes.
And that the history of that object is especially extraordinary. How
yes,
it got from one place
extraordinary.
to the other.
It is extraordinary. It comes from the armory of Tipu Sultan, and it was taken from him when he was killed in the Battle of Saranga-Patam, and the East India Company triumphs over Tipu Sultan. But it's one of these things which is branded, in a sense. The tiger, he was called the Tiger of Mysore, and the tiger is all over this thing, and it's, go and see it. It's in the armory section. It's an exquisite object, but then its history is complicated.
The objects, just so everyone's aware, all the objects that are referenced in Hew's sculptures are on view right now in our collection galleries, and you can find their locations online.
And that brings me to the point of The Monster by Domenico Guidi.
That's my favorite part of your sculpture.
Exactly. So, to be honest with you, that's my favorite part. So the monster at the bottom, that represents me, us, everybody who comes here, comes to the Met, consuming this stuff. This stuff is there for our consumption. But at the same time, when I come, I'm both consuming and questioning. Well, what's the story behind this object? You know, what's the real story? And as I said, these stories are complex. But this monster, which is it's a consumption of visual culture, basically. Yeah. And it's the audience, sorry, you know, it's us, you know. This is not a criticism, by the way, this is at all, because when I come to New York, I will come to the Met and I will spend a day just drifting backwards and forwards in a day. It's going, oh, I like that. You know what? Let me go and look at some paintings. No, I'm bored with that. Let me go and look at some ceramics. And the Met has been quite an inspiration for me over all the years. So that's why it's a big deal for me to be doing this commission. But at the same time, I'm questioning myself. I'm always questioning myself, which is, for myself, is quite irritating, quite honestly. You know? It's exhausting. You know? Self-analysis, please, you know? But I did some work for this, and the important thing about this, we're talking about the work, people come to hear about the work. If this thing fails completely, if you cannot see it as being interesting without any explanation, it has to work without any explanation. And the fact of choosing trophies is that everybody knows what a trophy is. You know, one thing I should say is that hop into background. So I'm hopping all over your questions, but Guyana is a major part of this whole thing for me. There's one. The last image went up there. Where are we?
Would you like an image of the
image of the Tamari petroglyph, which is on one of them, one of these broken, fragmented images. Anyway, it's there, and because Guyana was where Walter Raleigh went looking for El Dorado, and that's always held that concept of the Golden City. Growing up in Guyana, I would dream of, in the bush, and you walking in the forest, in the jungle, and you turn a corner, and all of a sudden, there it is, this golden city. It was a fantasy idea, but it's more than that. It's a myth, which is quite powerful, And it's a very good rum named El Dorado, but that's another conversation. But yeah, whatever I do, even though I'm using imagery which is not from Guyana, obviously I've lived in Britain, UK for 40 years now, but even though I'm not using imagery from Guyana, that's what it ends up feeling like to me, That's when things say, okay, right, this feels like a place which I know.
I mean, there's also, certain things that really stand out when you're standing right underneath these sculptures. So, for instance, besides the color and the scale of the object, but, inscribed in the trophy are these ever-seeing eyes that are looking in all directions.
Yes.
I think it's something that seems to, in one sense, point to the sort of Egyptian mythology, or to Hinduism. When you think of the different gods that are suggested. But I don't know. I'm just wondering.
I mean, for me,
what are you?
For me, I've always been interested in the concept of the all-seeing eye in the widest sense of the word, not just in the Christian sense of the word, because it's been imaging Christianity for years. The eye of providence, and also obviously it's on the back of the dollar bill. But for me, these eyes are just watching you. You know what I mean? They're there.
Why?
Just keeping things under control. Making sure that you know that we know that you know that we know. And particularly with the content of the work. So I'm drifting all over the place here, but this thing can be decoded a bit like an author's work who shall not be mentioned, like the Hew Locke code, shall we say, But it can be picked apart, and I'm constantly picking it apart and going, but that reminds me of that, and that's a bit like that, and that's a bit like that, But the eyes are important, and they are sort of, is it partly warding off the evil eye, or is it a watchful eye? I haven't quite decided. A lot of things I do are open-ended, and this is an open-ended thing. There's no specific answer to the question, basically, if you see what I mean.
And then there's also the sense that, everything seems to be ascending upwards. You have the monster at the bottom looking up. You have us at the bottom looking up. And the trophy seems to be overbearing.
Yes, and because this is a situation which is bigger than us. I'm always, I want you to be look up and see this thing. See this complicated issue, complicated image, if you see what I mean. But definitely, I like the idea of because it sort of deifies the work in a sense. It makes it something like a votive object. Literally all this stuff I'm making up on the spot, by the way. But the thing is, though, because I'm making it up on the spot doesn't make it any less genuine, But yeah, but I mean, and I should say something about the two outer trophies. They're fragments, and so the monster is consuming things which are fragmented now, and we don't know what they are. So one of them is a highly generalized image of an African mask, and the other one on the other side is a highly generalized image of a pre-Columbian mask, and they're snapped off. So they've been snapped off as if in some violent action, or maybe broken through age, who knows? But they're and the idea behind this is that for the viewer to make up what they think the rest of it might look like. So it's for the viewer to go, oh, I think it might be that, or I think it might be that, And yeah, because I was about to say trying to get the audience to do some work, but I mean, that sounds insulting, I mean, it's just about playing with the idea of what's there. You know what? At the end of the day, basically, I would like the audience to be walking into the museum and going, "Oh, that's beautiful. What's its story?" And because the stories are really fascinating, really, really fascinating. Not all of them, but a lot of the stories are really fascinating behind these objects, and the objects which are going into what is essentially a New York, or quite frankly, global powerhouse. There was the musician Bob Geldof. There's a program in Britain called Desert Island Discs, and it's on Radio 4, and you pick the discs. If you're a castaway in a desert island, you pick music you would like to listen to. And they give you a luxury at the end. And Bob Geldof, who started Band Aid and Live Aid in the 1980s, he without no hesitation said, "My luxury is the Metropolitan Museum." And I was like, and I really remember that. I was like, yeah, you're right, mate. Because if I had to pick, that probably would be my luxury as well, So when I talk about the monster consuming, it's me, but then I'm questioning my consumption at the same time. I was going, and at times at the same time I was going, I'll drift to another room, and just, and then I generally leave very tired in a daze. And I'm tired. The reason why I get tired in this place is because I walk around and I go, I walk past the room. Don't go in there, Hugh. You're exhausted. But exhausted or not, there I go. Chasing the art, as I used to say back in the day. Yeah. And again, here I am, to get that phone call offering me this thing, I was like, what? Do I think I'd be interested? Please. Yeah. Come on, And the thing is, coming here, I came here in last year, September, And I'm talking to my family, my sister and brother-in-law and them, and I'm having, apologize folks, but I'm having to sort of find a very complicated lie as to why, how did they let me into this country when it's locked down to anybody from Europe? And I had to show all kind of fancy papers and stuff like that, you know? But here we are, you know? Here we are.
No, that's true, but I just want to maybe expand a little bit on your approach to thinking about how these histories are sort of complicated and how, you know, continue to evolve. Because I was just trying to think about how you, by placing the fragments with the complete pieces, you are indirectly raising questions about how history has come to either present these objects, or how we have been taught about how, you know, history is totalized. And so these fragments begin to sort of, you know, subconsciously question, you know, whose history is this?
Yes, and that's obviously my cunning plan, you know, because that's what it's about. I mean, history is written by the winners, and it's about power, you know, and power writes the history, you know, and that's just. I'm always questioning things. As I said, I'm always questioning myself, but I'm obviously questioning the institution, you know what I mean? And so the relationship between the work and the Met is a complicated one, you know? Obviously, I love this place, that's taken for granted, but there's tension in that relationship. And the tension comes out from, you know, what's the story, you know? But it's you calm me down when I say complicated too many times. It's complicated. History is not simple, you know? So everything I've said for the last 3 minutes can be condensed into history is not simple. And there's a sort of burden of history and the weight of history. And that is something which I find really interesting. I don't shoulder that burden at all, but I kick that burden around on the floor, you know, just to see what we'll end up with, you know.
Hew, I have a question that actually, it's one we planned to ask, but not necessarily in relationship to the two sculptures on the outer edges. But it occurred to me looking at these slides, of the two outermost sculptures, they call to mind for me public monuments that have recently been destroyed, desecrated, graffitied by progressive groups, activists who take issue with the identity, say, of the person, the historical figure represented. Yeah. And now, in the last few years, the desecration of monuments is associated with the overarching controversy around meaning, identity, history. And so I look at the two outermost sculptures and I can't help but think of sculptures in Virginia that have been scrawled with graffiti and have become the subject of protests. And so maybe this is a good moment for us to transition into a conversation around public monuments. It's one that you've been involved with for many years. It's one that you've taken into account. This isn't exactly a work of public art because it lives on the facade of the Met, and yet it addresses the public in a very direct way. And you've spoken about the difference in making a work of art for an interior space and an exterior space. And so maybe we can dive into to that issue.
Well, the statue debate in Britain and Europe, Belgium in particular, it's very different, I think, to the statue debate over here. I mean, Colston came down in Bristol It's a statue of one of the founding fathers of Bristol, and who was a slave trader, basically. And that made international news. There was always a debate of like, that was not necessary, you know? In other words, but it was here's where we get into tricky territory. Everything has been easy so far.
Sorry.
No, it's all right, it's all right. This is your job, man, the hard questions, you know. I'm under the spotlights and thing, you know.
You can have fun in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, fine. We'll pass the drinks before I answer this question. I have a sort of retain and explain opinion about all of this, basically, because if things are removed, then history is removed. That's in certain situations. If it's in the Deep South, and I'm not going to be telling somebody that you must not remove this image of Robert E. Lee, you know, which went up long after the Civil War ended anyway, you know, that's not my position. That's not my place to say that at all, and I wouldn't. I don't think you can do that. I think certain things are, for want of a better word, too toxic to sort of. It doesn't matter really anyway. Do you know what I mean? Well, some things do matter, you know.
Representation definitely matters.
Representation does matter, but America is a different thing.
You've made work for public spaces before, and so you've grappled with the complexities of making pointed political works.
Not grapple. Grapple is a light way of saying I agonize about it.
You agonize, yes.
Because I'm like, how will this work? And I'm constantly, how will this sit? And also, how will people receive this thing? More to the point, how will this look in 10, 15 years' time? The people who put up a statue of, say, Robert E. Lee, they knew how it looked, and they knew how it wanted to look in 10, 15, 20, 100 years' time. It needs to stay like it is. This ain't going nowhere, thank you very much. But then this touches on all sorts of complex issues, you know? And, okay, I was taking part in New Orleans Prospect Biennale, and great experience, you know. And I was being driven home by one of the curators, and we're driving past this statue, and she said, "Oh, that's going to be removed, we think." And I was like, "What, really?" This is before the whole debate went quite violent, basically, and really dark. And I was like, wow, you know? And then within about a few months after this conversation, then everything started to become what it is today. And you have battle lines drawn on either side and stuff like that. And that's kind of depressing and scary, you know? This country, look, you guys have got guns, you know? And I'm sorry, you know, I'm not so, I become very diplomatic when somebody has a gun. I understand your point of view. Yes, of course I do. But no, can you put the gun away? Thank you very much. You don't need to worry about me. I'm not going to pull anything down, guy, you know, as long as you got that gun, you know what I mean? But yeah, man, guns scare me, you know. Old guns, like Tipu Sultan's blunderbuss, that's fine, no problem with that. But when somebody's pulling out an AK-47, it's like, right, dude, you won the argument there for now, you know?
So Hugh, here's a question then. What is the responsibility of the artist working in such a very politically volatile space?
I think you got to know your audience. You got to do research. For public sculptures, you need a third party involved, and you need to be reaching out to people. And but then that doesn't even work always, you know. But I do think that there's a definite responsibility. You're doing something in a gallery is one thing. You're doing something outside, people have no choice but to walk past it. There was a book, I think it's a book called, or Indra, my wife, knows, was talking to me about it, and it's called What's That Thing Over There? And it's about what's this anonymous sculpture that people would walk past every day. Well, you realize, people can see I'm struggling with this whole subject. But long story short, you have to be a bit thoughtful when you're doing something outside, or not, as the case might be. It depends on what you're willing to attract and what you're willing to not attract. You know, I mean, but public sculpture and sculpture in a gallery space, for me, is a different thing. You know, and
so, what were some of the considerations in making this work for the Met?
Oh, many considerations. I was outside the smaller version of this type of building, which is the New York Public Library, and I saw a bride being photographed for a wedding. I thought, well, that's interesting. You know, photographers setting up shining mirrors and stuff like that, golden light and all that. And then I came down to the Met the same day, and this massive Hummer limo pulled up, and a wedding party got out, took a few selfie shots in front of the Met, all piled back in again and drove off. And I was like, okay, so this thing is a wedding destination. So, you know, I'm not going to be putting something grim and horrendous, you know. Let's give people some gold, but in the gold, you know. But in the gold, there's a sting in the tail. If you look for the sting, you don't have to look for the sting. You know what I mean? It's up to you. But definitely a lot of thought goes into it, and definitely what was there needed to be something that anybody gets. You know, you don't have to be no super expert in art or contemporary art. Boom, that's a trophy. Yeah, I won one at school, or that bleep person beat me by 2 seconds to win one above me, and I've carried that burden for years. But so long story short, trophies can be very personal to people, and it needs to be something that was instantly recognizable from the street, because you're dealing with the pillars of this building are terrifying. They could visually crush you artistically. And it wasn't until the work literally got in and was installed, I was like, oh, okay, fine, I survived the pillars, you know?
Hew, can I follow up on Tumelo's question about the responsibility of the artist, especially when they're working in an outdoor public space? So responsibility implies ethics.
Yes, yes.
An ethical responsibility to do something, to say something. And how did that factor into the design of the commission for the Met?
Well, it factored in the sense that there are certain things I thought, well, I can't include that because that would be directly offensive. So, or I'm not from that background or that particular religion, so that can't go in. So it's constantly going back and forth over you'll always make mistakes. Let's just leave that there, you know. But it's very important that I operate with certain sensitivity. But then again, because I'm working with a powerhouse, not to make the powerhouse intimidate me from not saying what I want to say, you know. But then again, what I want to say is number 25. Complexity is all part of it. But it's quite important that, for me personally, that I operate with a bit of sensitivity, but not fear. Yeah. Fear would destroy the whole thing. And it's almost like you're becoming, bowing down to the great Met Museum, you know what I mean? This is about working in collaboration. This is a collaborative process, because we had many discussions about the design, and even, I mean, the eyes design, that literally came in the same way that I said something earlier about something that I say things and it's off the cuff, but actually genuine. The eyes came from a conversation where I was talking to you, and suddenly thought, well, that's what we could do. And then that conversation became the thing. And when I say that's what we could do, that's the way I discuss these problems. If I'm in the gallery doing something, I say, well, this is what I'm going to do. But if it's outside, this is what we're going to do. You know what I mean? Because it's you have to get people on your side. You know what I mean? It's diplomacy, basically. You know, it's not war. You know.
So when do you think it's worked? When do you feel that the piece has been successful? What's your measure for that?
If people take photographs in front of it, you know? I mean, that's the reality of the world we live in now, you know? But I knew we were on to something when I went down by the fabricators, guys, and we were talking about putting on gold leaf and stuff like that. And I'm looking at the thing and thinking, okay, that's not really quite working. I need to put some gold there. And it became like painting with gold leaf. No, a bit there. And then, no, we need to try this there. And lots of discussions. So it's a collaborative thing. So if somebody's working this thing for you, but you're there all the time going, no, a little bit there. And I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
When do you think it's worked?
Oh, right. Yes. So it's living on a razor's edge, this thing, yeah? And it was right the last day. This was done under pressure. You guys put people under pressure. I'm sorry, you know.
I apologize.
You know? But this, on the last day, we're working on this, and I was thinking, it's starting to work. And then it's then a bit more gold, and then, okay, right, too much gold. And so it's a bit of application and removal, and many conversations. But it was literally the last day when it's like, okay, fine, this is looking good, you know? And that's how it tends to work with me. It's not a very healthy way to work. I don't advise it at all, you know? But yeah, and here we are, as I said.
Well, Hew, do you think it's time to conclude and go out and have some?
I think I need a drink, quite frankly.
Yes. So Hew, thank you so much for your incredible commission.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
And thank you, Tumelo, for joining us. It was so much fun to be reunited on stage together. And we'd like to invite everybody in the audience to join us in the Great Hall for the reception. Thank you for coming.